Hello everyone! Let's continue with this series of tutorials about the Maverick UI layout. This time we will talk about the objects and object library panels we have here to the left. As you can see, I have a scene preloaded here. Since a few releases ago, this scene comes pre-installed with Maverick and opens by default when the software starts. Okay, so let's take a look at the Objects and Cameras panel. First we have the scene cameras. In this scene there's only one camera. If you select it, its attributes are revealed in the attributes editor. Then we have a list with the objects in the scene. As you can see, when they are selected, they are also outlined in the IPR. And if they are expanded, we can see the material each of these objects has been bound to. In further tutorials we will focus on materials. But for now, let's see what operations we can do with objects. Here we have three icons. The first one locks the object, which inhibits object translation, rotation and scaling, and avoids accidental material assignment. Then we have a fold visibility icon with which you can hide or show the object. And last we have a visible to camera icon. For example, let's hide the teapot. Let's hide its parts. As you can see, this icon makes objects disappear completely. Okay, let's unhide everything, and now let's try the visible to camera icon. You can see how the object disappears, but it keeps casting shadows. Right-clicking on the IPR, we get a context menu with similar object options. For example, we can isolate this selection if we want to temporarily hide the rest of the scene, and then we can hit Show All to revert visibility to the original status. These are very simple but very handy options. Now, let's discover a very fundamental tool in Maverick, the Move tool, which you can find on the top toolbar here. The Move tool features this floating panel where you can find multiple options to transform the objects in the scene. These controls are synchronized with the 3D gizmo here, which you can use to interactively translate, rotate, and scale your objects. These functions are fairly standard, so you will most likely feel at home here. Now, let's explore the Move tool shortcuts. Pressing Q in the keyboard brings the Move tool in its default status, but if we are only interested in translation, we can press W. If we only want to rotate, we can press E. And if we only want to scale, we can press R. More options in the Move tool. Let's enable translation and let's inhibit everything else. You may have noticed that you need to click and drag the axis you want to move along. But if you wish to lock motion to one particular axis, you can use the lock icons in the Move tool panel like this. And then you can track the object by clicking and dragging anywhere on the viewport. You can also lock more than one axis, like this, and then move along a plane. Axis locking also works for rotation and scaling. For example, let's enable rotation and disable everything else. And now let's lock to the Y-axis. We can rotate by clicking and dragging anywhere. A very convenient feature here is the ability to set a step size. For example, in rotation, a step of 5 means that you rotate your objects by 5, 10, 15 degrees and so on. This is extremely convenient. So far, we have been transforming objects individually, the body of the teapot in particular. Let's see how we can create groups in Maverick real quick. We multi-select the objects we want to group, and then we can either click the Create Group icon or right-click on the selection and select Group. Let's give a name to our newly created group. Let's call it Teapot, for example. Now we go ahead and enable the group selection mode at the top toolbar here. Now, as soon as I select one object in the group, the whole group is selected. So if we want to move the whole teapot, we can do what we went through earlier. We press W to bring the Move tool in translation mode, and transform operations will now treat all the objects in the group as a whole. Let's move the group around a bit. Let's discover now some more options in the Move tool. For example, we can relocate pivots at the top, at the center, at the bottom. This can be very handy to align objects in the scene. For example, if an object is floating over a surface it is meant to be aligned to, we can make sure the object pivot is at its base, and then use the Snap to Pivot option, select the alignment object, which in this case is the room, and there you go, the teapot gets placed over the target surface. From the Move tool panel, you can also reset transform values with these two last options. But okay, moving on. Let's go to the Objects Library panel and let's see what we have here. There are different tabs where you will find some very convenient goodies. The Basic tab features some bases and pedestals that you can use to elegantly present objects. We also have Primitives, with simple geometric shapes that you can use to test materials on, and finally a collection of rooms that you can use to easily create object presentation setups from scratch. All these items work with drag and drop. For example, let's drop a base on the teapot. As you can see, Maverick intelligently repositions and resizes bases and rooms so they match your scene. Let's try another, looking good right off the bat. For example, if we want to rescale the base, we press R and rescale. Primitives work similarly. Let's delete this base first, pressing the delete key. Let's drop a cube. Now let's drop a sphere. These primitives can be used as test dummy objects. Rooms, as mentioned earlier, give you an easy way to create a product photography setup. For example, let's drop this room on the scene. Now let's hit zoom extents, and there you have it. The room gets automatically aligned and rescaled to match your model. Let's try some more. For example, this one, which is simpler. Now let's move closer in. Let's try another one. You can experiment yourself, but this is very, very easy. Now, what else do we have in the objects library? Okay, we also have floors. Floors can be dropped directly to the scene and they catch shadows and reflections automatically. But let's go back for a minute to the lighting library, because since the latest release of Maverick, we have also included a very complete alternative to IBL, floors and rooms called ambiances that we will go through in great detail in a future video. For now, let's pick one of these black ones here. This is a very interesting ambience for product visualization. Now let's go back to the floors library. For example, let's drop this one with sharp reflections. This one will replace the floor of the ambience. Now let's try this one with rougher reflections, and so on. Okay, now let's try with a different type of ambience. This time we will pick a sunlit scene. Here you can see the sun shadow, which comes from the environment IBL, but sometimes you may prefer to get rid of the shadow and see some sort of ambient occlusion instead. Okay, so let's pick one of the floors with ambient occlusion enabled and drop it. Now let's pick a different one that mixes ambient occlusion and reflections. There you go, as easy as dragging and dropping. Last, we have the Favorites tab, which you can use to tag the items that you prefer, the ones that you use most frequently, like this one. Okay. And then you get them collected in this list here. As you can see, using these panels is really easy. and mastering them is key to making awesome photography in Maverick. So, see you in the next tutorial!